No one else has that.
Scary thing, you know. You're on your own, it goes separate.
But no, that was so easy. It wasn't that bad. I mean.
No, they like to drive in.
Okay, well, okay.
He likes to drive in, so we put it on.
I know, Jane,
Yes,
can you take
yes.
a photo of us, please?
Oh, yeah.
I will.
We're on vacation. The Cali vacation.
Okay, what is going?
This is the big one. The big one.
I don't feel about those.
Criteria you can wait too. They have some that wait some for art.
Gotcha.
Sure.
But, okay.
Thank you.
Did you like it?
I'm sure.
Really?
Whatever.
Here,
Okay, thanks. Good to see you. How are you doing? And then. Yeah. That's good. I'm glad to see you here. Yeah, that's good color.
Oh, I like that.
And they're not really big.
Aren't you clever to cut yourself?
Yes. That's so great.
It's smooth.
Well, we're still doing like this year. I'm not running it in the summer. So I'm running it in the fall as well. Synchronize on. Yeah, we try to that's kind of outsiders.
Oh, I bet that's good. I imagine you were. It's hard.
Ours was very interesting. The big thing that they're getting addressed. Everybody was saying
The difference is we're not doing
the core point was we need more practice ready.
Well, they say
Nobody mentioned how to switch resources from
I'm glad to see that also that.
Well, we need to.
So like we have
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, like some old stuff,
Right.
In order for us to have.
yeah, so like we have
And I just don't know when.
I know it's a Wallace print.
We'll just see,
We have a little bit of
I'm
paper.
just wondering, because it says to be all types of student learning, so.
We can't help having a little bit. It's online too.
You know, the pedagogic sometimes.
Yeah, and we didn't have that.
Oh, are we not supposed to? Oh.
Well, we want people to follow along because they're.
Okay.
Yeah.
What
It's where you register.
Is it Eastgate? Yeah, Eastgate. Oh, no, it's smaller. Yeah.
We have to pay for it.
it's all online as well.
We just have.
I can totally see them. I just make sure.
Some kids have say, oh, yeah, we have. There's also our.
Well, because if I broke down, and then they got rid of it. Well, I noticed some of them.
Some of them don't have a home. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially at table, it's very hard to take notes. The hard one.
Feel like it. Yeah.
Like it. We have paper handouts, even though it's illegal.
Just but only one.
Only one, and just don't show anyone.
Again.
Oh, haha. Oh, no, definitely not on my.
At least there's only one page.
Yeah.
I know, I
Yeah, because it's like you're looking. Oh, so then I think, yeah. Go back.
Yeah, I was
It happened to me, yeah. So then I would take a note, like, go to the back. For you, it was probably a lot.
You'll see, so I'll attend this.
Absolutely not saying any of that stuff. Yeah. Oh, I bet it was
Yeah.
especially like in the morning for breakfast.
That's fine. And this is the guy who say,
Okay, well now it is a secret. It's like everybody else like the bumpers are all. I think it's more interesting. He comes home from work and I'm gonna talk to Slade. Go to the stove. Yeah, we were just sitting
no, I didn't want recording.
Is that recording right now?
Yeah, no voice, they turned off. And then have some. Only one phone started tonight. It's on there as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't care. I just didn't want you to get snapped. Gotcha. It's really yeah, me too.
Very good.
Those are my nieces. Okay, these two are not working. Oh, the same. No, that's my son. Yeah. Great. Actually, these were the seven. They're beginning.
How are you doing? It's funny, every conference, it seems like there's one or two people that Actually, we went out for dinner, Will and I went out for dinner with... No. I was just going to say the person we went out with was Will and I got to know Will. So it was nice to catch up.
Cool. Where'd you go? Did you not? Thank you so much.
I haven't. Went out for sushi when I was in town.
Cool.
From the other side of it. She's living in Miami.
Great story.
Let's hear it. Can you replicate that?
Yeah, we did. I think she's gonna work just fine.
If I close my eyes, I feel like I'm on the play or something, sitting in the arms.
Hello. You survived the drama that was going on at Marshall? Just barely. Okay. I don't need to know any details, but everything's okay.
I was hoping to get Bill broken up last night and bring out.
Extended drama.
Next year.
Yeah. My voice is more.
So all your stocks
The speakers. It's sort of like no, I think it's also
In my day, it's
Do we know where it is yet, or?
Yes, ours is
I know where to come. Yeah.
Where did you go? Close enough, you could nail the boss.
I went to undergrad and graduate school in Massachusetts. I spent 8 years there.
I'll turn it on. Oh, sure. I like it. Cheers. How are you doing? Where did you grow up? Okay, so this is coming out of the Carolinas.
Been there longer than anywhere. Occasionally, if I'm talking to.
All right, looks like we're at 10:30, so we're within the parameters of our speaking time. We thought we'd go ahead and begin. My name is Angela Upchurch. I'm a professor of law at Capital University Law School in Columbus, Ohio. And my colleagues with me today are Cynthia Ho from Loyola University Chicago School of Law, professor of law there. and Susan Gill is a professor of law at Capital University with me. We're doctrinal professors, and amongst us in our class we teach, one of the classes we all teach is civil procedure. And so the materials you're going to see today, we're going to use a little bit of what we did in that class to demonstrate how we think you can use technology to help individualize education through online tools. So for our presentation, what we hope to do is provide, for those of you who are educators, things that you can implement in your classroom. And for those of you who are tech support or directors who want to work with educators, some from our perspective, how you can discuss if they say, I really want to do this thing, but can't quite end up talking the tech language, maybe a little bit of a bridge with the gap there. All right, so our presentation is actually going to follow a handout that we gave to you, but it's also available on the Cali webpage, including the Prezi link, both QR code and the URL are on the webpage right now, and a larger, more robust handout that we are not providing in print is also on.
This is the first page of the handout, so there's like multiple pages, but the handout I think is really good for organizations, so we gave you the first page.
So our perspective really is to take a look at educational goals and then think of the technology and how they respond to them. All right, so what do we view individualized education through online tools to actually be? Well, we really think that individualizing education comes in two primary ways. One is through assessment and feedback, that you individualize and tailor to the student by providing now more in the way of formative assessment as they continue through their learning, that they're getting feedback on how they're doing, as opposed to the traditional law school model, which was you really don't know, in fact you think you're doing great until you get that final exam and realize I didn't get any of this. All right, so that's one of the ways that we think technology can help with providing more assessment. The other is through differentiated instruction. And we mean this in two levels. The first is differentiating the content so that it can be compatible with different kinds of learners, both in ability and in their learning style preference. And where I arrived at using technology for this was most professors really try and tailor their instruction to this mythical middle of the class. You know, everybody's sort of, you're paced at just about the right level of difficulty. But what I started finding happening was I had less of those folks and more at the painfully bored because they already understood this material end, or totally lost and telling me I'm moving way too fast. And so technology and the tools we're going to give you allowed me to differentiate the content in the classroom so that I could actually meet more of those learners. And the last way that we are going to look at differentiation is using technology to meet different learning styles. Auditory visual learners, but also kinesthetic learning. All right, why did we get here? Just briefly, moving beyond the technology of when I went to law school, which was who got to use a whiteboard and Socrates, to the idea that now we're responding to criticisms of legal education, including the pressure to include more things like practical skill training in class. At the same time that you're dealing with a student body who has a diversity of learning styles and needs, and that student body is even becoming more difficult to reach. So a lot of schools, the spread in what kinds of students they're having in the classroom is changing more than in the past. And that they're coming in with a very different kind of educational background, one in which they've had less lecture at them and more interactive. So that's why we think technology can help us. So that first teaching goal, if you look at your little handout tablet or if you're online, is the assessment and feedback. And the first category we have is using online clickers and quizzes. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to my colleagues.
So my goal is assessment and feedback. I want to assess the students and find out how they're doing during the term, and I want to give them feedback, but I have 80, and so I need technology to help me. So the tool I chose, and I want to explain the tool, and then I want to tell you why I chose it so that you can decide if you would recommend it to a faculty member or adopt it. So I chose to use online quizzes under TWEC that were due an hour before the class. And what these quizzes were doing is, you know in the casebook, it has a casebook and those questions the students answer? No, they don't, right? They don't. So I had very basic questions which led the students through the material so that I could guarantee they had a core common understanding when they came into the classroom. I assessed it by assigning 15% of the grade to these online quizzes. And it immediately gives the student feedback because they go ahead and they click multiple. Rule 4 allows this. They click may, and the answer is must, and they're wrong. So they get immediate feedback, and sometimes I put a little explanation, like reread the first line. So I'm using technology. I give quizzes about twice a week before due 1 hour before class, when those students are getting feedback and I'm getting assessment as I go, that at the end of the term I can reward students who diligently prepared the class. Why did I choose TWEN? There are several. There's a Cali one. You can also embed questions in video, but I elected to use the TWEN quiz function. And the reason I picked it, so these are some of the reasons that faculty should think about, or if you're in IT and recommending it, you can ask these questions of a faculty member. I was already using TWEN, so I wanted a one-stop shop for students. Much easier than having a separate place for them to go to. Everything, they look at me and they, even before I say it, they go, it's on TWEN. Yep, it's on TWEN. So one-stop shop, it's free. Students do not like paying for you to assess them. It has to be free. Equally, you want to look at how easy it is to create the questions and to grade the questions, right? Because you're doing this during the semester while you're trying to teach, you're uploading these questions. So one thing I liked about TWEN quizzes is you can cut and paste. So if you already had a worksheet, you can simply drag it into the questions. You don't need to recreate the questions. You can also, it automatically grades them. So I come in an hour before class and they're all graded. I would stay away from the fill in the blank because you have to self-grade them. And you think that's 5 minutes? It is not. It's 35 minutes to an hour to go through all of those and to decide what you're accepting or rejecting. The last two things, which I think you really want to do, is you have to make sure if you're doing assessment, it allows anonymous grading. Right? Does it allow a function of anonymity if you're going to do it through assessment? And TWEN allows that anonymity. And then the last thing you want to ask yourself or ask the faculty member is what kind of reports do you want it to generate that you are likely to use? You want, if you're doing assessment, it has to be individualized, right? It has to be tied to their exam number or I can't assign the grade at the end. And then I also want cumulative reports on the entire class. So if you're thinking of trying to, your goal is assessment feedback, pre-class, online quizzes, those are the things to think about. Cynthia, we'll talk about a different device that she uses.
I also use quizzes, but I often use them post-class, so we're going to get to that a little later. But I use clickers in class. There's a bunch of different clickers. I started using them a while ago because I saw them at a conference, and I was like, this is really cool. And I also found the students also like them. A number of years ago, one of the talk shows, I can't remember if it was like Colbert Report or the other one, actually somebody was clicking and the students came to me like, this was on TV. Like, therefore it must be valid. But beyond the students liking it, I think it's a great way to deal with the fact that many of us have large classes. So my Civ Pro class in recent years has been about 90. So I still do Socratic Q&A, but sampling like 2 or 3 or even 10 students is a very small fraction of the class. So at periodic points, I use the clicker questions to see if, well, are those couple of people who I ask, are they representative of what the class understands as a whole? So I tend to use it at the beginning of class to kind of, as after I do the review, like, are they getting the stuff we just went over? And if not, I'll do it again. I also do it at points throughout the class because I find that it's really helpful to kind of break up the pace of the class and make sure they're following along. I also think that this is a way of fighting technology with technology. So they're on Facebook, on their phones, etc. But if you periodically intersperse these clickers, then they kind of have to be focused on class. So I had to be reviewed by my faculty for something or other, and one comment I got was like, they're all paying attention, as if this was really novel. I personally don't think it's because I was so illuminating, but I do think having this technology helps keep them engaged. I do want to mention something that Susan said about about grading. So I count as 15% of their grade class participation, which includes actually responding when being called on, and also things like clickers and online quizzes. But for the clickers and online quizzes, I give them credit as long as they answer. Doesn't matter if they get it right or wrong. And the reason I did it is because before I did this, like lots of people wouldn't click in their answer. And I don't really care what the answer is, whether it's right or wrong, but I want to know if 20% of the class is confused or if it's 40%. And before I found that, I think a lot of people who weren't sure, they just wouldn't answer at all. And then it was hard to figure out, assess what to do next in the classroom. What was interesting about counting it that way is it didn't really change the grades for students at the top, but it does change a little bit the grades sometimes for students at the bottom. So some students, they actually got even worse grades than their exam score because they just hadn't been taking the quiz, which kind of makes sense because, if you're not doing the stuff that's supposed to be helping you, maybe you'll do even worse. So I'm going to tell the students this year, if you don't do all these things, your grade is going to turn out even worse, and see what happens with that. In terms of the type of technology, cost was a big issue with me. I was the first person at my faculty to ever use a clicker device. And at that time, professors who had adopted in law schools used the CPS system. So that was the one I sought out. And at the time, they were like, if you're the first adopter, we're willing to give you the instructor software for free. So that's what I did. But now, in the last 5 years or so, my university has adopted a different system. So I decided since the university is adopting it, that meant that students could buy and sell used devices and also be able to rent them. I would just move to that platform. And that's the iClicker. And I actually found that that system is actually much more robust than the CPS system. So if you're debating which system to use, I definitely recommend the iClicker. What's also nice about the iClicker is you can use it with a smartphone. As long as your university doesn't block it. My university very stupidly blocks it because they think that, well, the students might get distracted by the phone as if they wouldn't use the phone otherwise. But if you use a smartphone, it's actually really, really cheap. I think those are all the issues I had about Flickr. So turn it back to you.
Yeah, and we'll be coming back to some of these technologies again when you see them for different educational purposes. But let's just preview a few other ones for you. I have screen sharing here. I just wanted to briefly state there's a lot of ones on the market available. One that I'm going to be using this fall as a platform in a class I have, which will be totally synchronized online. It's a screen sharing platform called Join Me. And basically all it is the individuals log in using my host code, and then they can watch my screen, and either through their VoIP, through their computer, or through a phone, cell or landline, you can call into a number, and all the audio is integrated together. Why I chose this one as opposed to some other more sophisticated ones, which I previewed, including Fusebox and GoToMeeting. Our school didn't have a set video conferencing available for me, so I knew I was going to have to kind of choose one. Join Me was much less costly, and the functionality operates much more like the Mac kind of user face. So there's like 3 bubbles, so if you are used to those little, like how the Mac pops up with an image and the things just pop underneath it for both the student and for me. So it's very, very user friendly. It allows for annotation, and it allows me to shift the screen to any of 250 people who log in at one time. Now, unfortunately, I only had 30 people in this class for my first go around, but it allows me to kind of pass things off. They can also instant chat with individuals, groups, or the entire class, and I can do so at the same time. The other ones also, I think, accommodate more easily video conferencing. I have a cheaper solution for that for my class that I'll show you in a moment, but that's an option if you have these things available to think about screen sharing, that if you want to have more sophisticated features, the one that this one doesn't have that these two do, that GoToMeeting and Fusebox, also have the recording capabilities. I can screenshot capture, but I cannot record a full class at this time. But that wasn't something that was necessary for my use. But why I'm previewing these now in assessment and feedback is to show you that you can do things like pairing a smaller lecture to a smaller group of people with online quizzes so that you're actually quizzing and polling them in a virtual simultaneous format. So if you use online quizzes before class, It is asynchronous. The individuals at their own time thinking about the material, logging into a quiz. Using screen sharing allows you to actually synchronize the delivery and the quiz response. So if you get like to question 1, there's only 60% at getting an accurate response, I can stop and reinvest in figuring out what the problem was. Another thing to think about if you're going to use it for assessment or feedback is whether or not you want to actually see their faces. Sometimes it isn't important, or actually I want them, if I'm doing more of a delivery of content, to be able to focus on the screen. I, of course, can show myself when I screen share, because I can use my video camera and show myself whatever I have on the screen I share, but I can't see them. They can get my screen and manipulate it if I bounce at them, but they cannot show their screen, if that makes sense. So if you really want to be able to like work with a group of students that need to see how they're doing, like for example, if your class is demonstrating a simulation, like a negotiation or cross-examination, this would be more of the model you want to choose for a cheaper version I'll talk about in a second. So that's screen sharing for assessment and feedback purposes. I have also used it in this kind of setting without quizzes, but more for feedback in instant chats. So the Twin platform through live discussion has an instant chat. We'll talk about it a little bit later. We use this for office hours and other things, and you'll hear about that in a moment. But you could provide feedback to students or even assess them by providing quiz questions and they could respond in. This one has the least amount of interaction with the user because they have to read what you type and there's not as much feedback that way. But a Google chat is another good way to do feedback or assessment, meeting with a smaller group of students and giving them feedback. That one, I guess, of course, is free. You can have 9 other users with you. You can share documents with them if you use Google Plus Extras. You can share a document that way, and they can see that as well. But that's my cheap version of the video conferencing, because I wasn't going to be able to go up to the high-end, larger platform. But if your professors just want to do it a little bit, you don't want to invest in a lot of things, it's very user-friendly. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there on how to use it, including some created by educators, which is very helpful. All right. The last bit of feedback was online videos, and we'll see these come up a couple times. For this purpose, the idea is how do you give students feedback on their work product using an online video. So in my paper writing course, I give the students a typed memo that summarizes the problems I saw overall with everybody. This is an upper level policy writing paper course. I also give handwritten comments on the students' papers. What I found in the past, though, is that when the students would come to the conference, they would often tell me, I get this comment a lot, because these are students who are in their 2nd or 3rd year. My legal writing instructor said the same thing to me. And of course, they had not really moved beyond that comment other than expressing frustration. So what I did was I created a YouTube video. I just did a screen capture, voiced over my comments on their submitted electronic copy. You can be even more sophisticated and open it in Word review function so that you can type in changes to their document while you're doing voiceover. But I tried to highlight some of the big errors they had. So let me just show you a small portion of it so you can get an idea.
General memo sent to the class and the handwritten comments I have on your actual paper.
So
Let me start by saying I think you've done a good job here. I have a few things that I'd like to direct your attention to so that you can work on them for your next paper, but I think you got a solid basis here. First of all, some general large scale kind of construction
comments. Talk about for headers in a second.
You've got some very weak headings throughout your paper. You really should be writing those headings to assist the reader in trying to follow your argument. So they should actually be both persuasive and stated in sentences. As soon as you have very abstract kind of concepts, shaving already limited resources. It's almost like if I was to scan the paper as a school board member, I should be able to look at the headings and get an idea of what the arguments are. And these,
so you can see, like, the idea here was I had on the paper more constructively, and in the handwritten one, you'll see next to it, like, either revised comments. So this is the clean copy I'm voicing over. And as I mentioned, you can open it in Word and just screencast over the reviewed comments. But I was able to really tell them what I mean by you have weak headings, and then I later described, what I wanted that to mean. And this particular student came to the conference to me after this video and said, now I'm really understanding what you mean by this, why this isn't persuasive, because I read through each one. This paper was designed to be a policy paper to school board members as to whether they should adopt a policy. And they kind of did these very abstract, like their title was Keeping Our Children Innocent. I can't that's not something that, this is their first paper, that's not something that should go out to their clients about whether or not they should adopt this policy, but I think they thought they were being creative and punchy, and so we were able to talk about it in that way. But other more complicating issues like your argument kind of defeats itself in this place. It's hard to write out, but I can express it using inflection in my voice and reassurance. Because this paper, they struggled a bit, but I could tell they put a lot of time in it. So with my voice, I could say, I think you got a solid basis, which is a lot easier when you're reading all of my comments over the paper to kind of keep. And so they came to the meeting with a lot more information and a lot more ready to do it. In fact, the student had redrafted many of these headings.
You have a little question.
I'm sorry, question? Yeah.
Just a quick one. In terms of the mechanics of
Yes.
the feedback, are you posting it to YouTube? For the
So
feedback?
you can post it to YouTube, and then you can also select it to be an unlisted number, and that's what I do. So I have a YouTube channel, and then when I give them that printed copy, I make one for each individual student, and I just cut and paste their link. And then so I would have my secretary go in and actually make sure I cut and pasted the right links. Because this one, if you came up on my YouTube, if you search my YouTube page, you won't find these things. When I search it, I see the actual exam number, because it's also anonymous, which is another complicating thing. So the student comes, picks it up based on their number, and then can read it. But yeah, I'm sensitive to that idea that no one can search these,
Did you have any problems with the university, worried about privacy or anything as a follow-up to that?
No more so than when I drop the paper off and I leave it with a stack on the desk and people can pick it up. Because the only way you can get this, they are generated randomly. My numbers, you can't anticipate what the number sequence is. It's scrambled enough that I'm not concerned about that. You can also screencast and post to your own private page. I just didn't have the storage space at the end that I had through YouTube. And I told the student the only way anyone else can get this URL is if you forward it to them. And of course, just like anything else, unless you have an honor code that says they can't share papers, it's the same kinds, for me, the same kinds of restrictions I had on paper, sharing or working with others apply here. And I added that to the syllabus. Now I'm going to be using videos. So for me, after the paper came out, it wasn't a problem if they shared with others. That was part of the group learning. But if in your class you don't want them to see or share with others, you should include a specific instruction. I would advise that don't share this URL with others. But they're not easily accessed. I use something called Screencast-O-Matic, and the larger handout that's only available on the Cali webpage, we have all the different kinds of technology we use for each of these subcategories that you can click on and see. That's all, yeah.
Are you able to record those videos pretty much in a single take?
Yes.
Just as easily as you're talking to them?
I always do a one-take shot. Now, there's people who are much more perfectionist than me, but I will tell you, I actually found the students would comment sometimes, because I would grade the paper and then write little notes on the side of what I wanted to screen capture and do it immediately after, because then I was fresh with it, and sometimes that would be late at night. And so I had one where I started yawning in the middle of it, and I said, I'm sorry, I apologize, I've been up with the kids. And I just went on, and the students said that, they talked to me about that. They actually felt through all the different video things I've done in the class that, we had this personal relationship that I didn't in any way intend to foster other than they heard me more, because I do a lot of screen capture for my class. And I think the fact that it wasn't super polished was actually welcomed by them, yeah.
I've done something similar where I take an actual question from an exam, put it in one column in Word, and then in the next column I rewrite certain paragraphs that I would like the students to pay attention to. And before I start, I review the basic concepts and how the students should think about approaching a problem. I say, well, you've learned all these things in class, let us look and see how the examiner will read your paper.
Right.
And as I go through the paper, I will make changes on their script or point them to
the model.
Yeah.
That's great. And I think it's the same kind of, this use, there's so many different potential uses for feedback with these things, but I found, the thing I can tell you that I found the most helpful about it was how much it opened up and engaged the students in a way that just giving them the handwritten or typed comments had. Because I would spend a lot of time writing, typed comments. I still do that, but I was surprised at how much more they engaged in the writing process than they had before. Yeah.
I don't know if you said this before or not, but what screen capture software were you using?
So what screen capture, just so that people can hear you who are watching this, what screen capture software did I use for this? For this one I use Screencast-O-Matic, and it's listed in the uploaded larger handout. There's a lot of different ones you can use. The reason I like that one is it's very cheap. You can buy like a year license, I think it's $15 if you're an educator, and it actually has editing features with it. And it uploads to a variety of platforms. So Screen, Cast-O, Matic.
It's page 3 of the
the
handout.
uploaded handout, yeah.
And it's easy.
Yeah, basically it's it's an app, so each time the applet kind of loads, you basically size the screen to what you want it to be, and there's a nice big red button that's for record, and then you hit it, and then you hit it when you stop. For me, like, it's easy use for both me and the ultimate use of the student as well, and cost. And so that's, I try and pick everything like $20 or less. All right. Let's show you a couple more. Modifying content in and out of class. This is a different educational goal. This is really both rows 2 and 3 of the table handout you have here. So we're going to talk about how you can alter the content to both modify it for different types of learning styles, and then also, which a lot of this will focus on, to modify the actual content for students who are having difficulty or who need a little bit of a boost because they're feeling bored or not engaged with the material. All right, so the first one we're going to look at again is at our response work, clickers, and quizzes, but look at them from a different perspective.
So I also use those pre-class quizzes to modify the content I offer in class. And I do that in 2 ways. One, I now know I'm bringing them in with a core level of understanding. So if you think of your class with the gunners, the hopelessly lost, in the middle, I do those pre-class online questions to bring that bottom up to a common core understanding. I used to find I would spend the first 10 minutes of class what I call checking their homework, which is did they really read and get that basic stuff. And so I've moved that checking the homework out of the classroom and more productively, I think, use their study time, because they focus on the questions. So they're doing directed study because they're looking at my quiz questions. So it allows me to have that core common understanding. The second thing it does is if you tell them it has to be in an Arabic or class, that's why I want that cumulative printout. So I get a printout and it says that the whole class, questions 1, 3, and 6, 2 people got it wrong. I'm like, shit, I'm not doing that stuff, right? I'm not spending time on that. It's they got it. But then I look at 3 and I'm like, oh my goodness, I got 30 students who don't get that. And so I can then allocate class time to number 3 in a way I would never have guessed. And it actually some of them you can predict when you've been teaching, you're like, that was going to be ugly. But you also get surprise ones where just for that class they're having trouble with something. So therefore I alter my class content to make it more focused on the students I have because I've got this report. So if you want to do this, the key thing is what report will it offer you. And I will tell you, some of the products offer you really sophisticated reports. I don't have time to read that. It's an hour before class. I'm trying to work out what to do. All I need is, this is how many got this right or wrong, and this is the distractor they picked. So I would vote against extensive, difficult reports because you just won't have time to use them. The second way I use it is I also use it to alter what I do outside the classroom. And this is where the anonymity issue is a tough choice. So what I do is I looked, for instance, this past semester, I had a student who was below minimal competency on 3 quizzes. That taking them, or she was taking them below minimal competency. And there's something wrong. Right? I can just tell something wrong. Because it's anonymous, so my problem is I'm using it with assessment, so it's anonymous. So I had to email the head of student services, and I said, could you reach out to whoever is 546-789 and find out what's going on? Because there's something going on. And sure enough, she emailed me back a couple of days later and said the student really appreciated it. They had a death in the family. They thought they could cope. You know, we've now got support in place for that student. So if you do it with assessment, your problem is you only have an exam number. If you're not doing it with assessment, then you can see with these individual printouts which students are struggling, and you can ask them if they want to come in and meet with you and have a little study group because they hate civil procedure. So you can change what you're doing out. Instead of having those generalized office hours where random people come in, and mostly the gunners at the top, right? They're in, and they're like, I want to talk about how this interacts with this other role. And I'm like, cool, but I've got people who are like, I don't know how A relates to B, right? And so instead, you can use your out-of-class time office hours to pull in on those students who are struggling. And of course, you have to do it diplomatically. You know, you can't say, hey, do you want to join the, I don't know, Bloomberg meeting group? Instead, you know, but you can engage differently outside the classroom. So that's how I use quizzes. Am I meant to go on to group quizzes?
Yes.
Oh, I also use clickers, and I think Cynthia's going to talk about using clickers post-class and in-class. I also use clickers as a method to change the content in my class by changing the learning style. So clickers can be individualized. They each have a clicker, and it's whether they got it right or wrong, much more assessment feedback. You can also give a clicker to a law firm, and you say to your little group, in 3 minutes, you have to pick A, B, or C. Agree, discuss, reach the answer, click in, and justify. Because I'm coming back to you, and you better tell me why you picked that. So you can use clickers to get group learning and discussion going, which changes your method of delivery within the classroom.
Just to touch on the last point Susan raised about using clickers with groups, I have each student use the clickers individually, but sometimes when there's a split in how they respond, like 20% A, 20% B, 20% C, I say, okay, we're going to do a pair share. You know, talk to your neighbor for like, 2 minutes, and then we are going to re-poll. And sometimes by talking to someone, that changes their answer. Not always, but it's kind of worth a try. So I think that is also a useful learning tool. What I also want to talk about is using clickers in combination with quizzes. So I very rarely do the quizzes before class. I mostly use the quizzes after class. So what I do is I take extensive notes in class about things that they get really stuck on. And then based on that, I create an online quiz on Twin of like 10 to 20 questions. And then I say by a particular time, make sure you have done this quiz if you want to get full credit for class participation. And based on that report, which Twin can easily give you per student or for the whole class, I decide which things do I need to focus on. Sometimes if I'm creating a quiz for the first time, which was last year, some of the confusion might be because my question itself is unclear, but what's really cool about the quizzes is you can also see it in live time, who's taking it. And I always tell the students, if you found a question confusing, feel free to let me know, and I can try to modify it for the rest of the class. And also that kind of helps me get feedback. But even if they don't give me any feedback, specifically if 40% got it wrong, then I know to go over that topic in class. And what I do is I combine the feedback I get from the overall quizzes with creating new clicker questions. I was like, okay, so I'll usually show, well, this is the question you got wrong, and like this is what the answer should have been. And I see if there's any questions. And then if they say no, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to see if you actually understood what we were just saying. And I'll give them a new clicker question. Sometimes they'll get it right, and sometimes they won't. And I'm like, okay, well, you didn't get it. You either weren't telling me that you had questions, or we need to redo it again. So I think it's just an example of how you can use each of these tools together to assess and retest them. Also with the quizzes, I usually do it, about stuff we just covered, but you can always throw in other stuff. And this happens for both the quizzes and the in-class clickers to make sure they're not forgetting stuff you covered, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So what's really nice, I don't know that we've said this explicitly, but with the clickers, you can see right away, and so can the students, what the answers are. One thing I learned after my first year is rather than telling them right away which is the right answer, it works better to have the students try to explain which is the right answer. And sometimes I would find they pick the right answer for the wrong reason, which is a very key moment. So, and it also helps that even if they can pick the right answer, A, B, C, D, that they have to articulate it. So that's important. And also sometimes I have them tell me why certain answers are wrong so that we can, then walk through that and they can try to teach the students who are a little bit weaker.
So the next one is look at online videos again, but this one is in the context of what many people call flipping. So I know you've had a lot of other, did you have questions?
I just wanted to go back that. I know that for a physics class that was actually flipped, one of the things they did in their pre-work, at every multiple choice question they had answer it and then why did you answer that way? So, to make them think about it, so they're not just randomly picking, they have to give an explanation. And like you said, if they're using wrong reasoning to get to the answer, even if they get the right answer, that
You have to up a program. So Twan does not allow them to do that. They can email you individually and say, and believe me, they're law students, so they do. I made this question, I don't think you're taking into account that. And you do get a lot of feedback that way, and I encourage it. But you have to buy a more sophisticated quizzing function to allow them to actually do that.
Although I haven't tried this, but there is a fill in the blank option on Twin. So it's possible you could ask them, but then you have to read through all the responses.
And you don't have time to focus on that. You don't. It's enough to alter your content based on what you see that morning to try and work out. So I try and work out why they did it wrong in the class because I find I just don't have time.
The next one we have is online videos, and this is on the premise of what most people talk about as flipping, where you take portions of the traditional class, put it outside in online videos where the students are preparing for class or reflecting back on class, can watch the video. They then generally, and I've heard this always with quiz questions so that they're more engaged when they watch the video. And I got some more information about how well they were doing. Then I could modify my in-class time to do those elusive things like practical skill exercises. I know there was a lot of other sessions already on flipping, and there's one technology we haven't talked about that I want to make sure we get to. So I'm not going to belabor this too much, but if you're interested more in a deeper discussion about the flipping portion, feel free to come see me afterwards, because I flipped and the majority of my civil procedure jurisdiction class, the entire semester, like big portions, I did about 2 to 3 videos per week. It ended up earning me in the end 4.5 classes back because it's not a 1 minute to 1 minute ratio. The students came in more engaged consistently throughout the class. They started about a third way through the term answering the same multiple choice questions I had used for kind of grounding and assessment purposes that we had data on for the last several years. They were by about 10% to 15% scoring higher than all my previous years by the time we hit about third way through the semester. And that was not indicative of their entering credentials or where they should have been at. I think they actually invested more coming to class. They were better able to do class. And then as a result, we had a much better time. And I as professor and they as students. Yes?
Can you speak to how much time they had to spend before class and how it equated to a traditional?
Me or the student?
Well, both.
Okay, so the question is how much time before class and how does that equate to typical learning?
Right.
So I try and make the videos no more than about 10 minutes because I don't think they have much more time than that to spend on them and start losing interest. I use YouTube so I can watch the audience retention throughout videos, and it just starts to drop off even if I'm asking them questions. So that's one thing as far as how long it takes. I don't edit a lot. I had created already in many classes, I had PowerPoints or some visualization. If you don't, you need something engaging for them to watch. If you've always just lectured and had a whiteboard, you can just tape yourself and do that. But it means that you're not going to have as much on which to just make an easy tape. So that's a little bit of time you want. For the students, I encourage them and I provided explicit notes about stopping, rewinding, reviewing. Initially, I found they were not using the videos effectively because they just hit play and were like, well, I wish you'd cover that again, as opposed to thinking about, now's my time to really sit and reinvest. And I think it was because the culture was a different culture. I really wanted to invest in them, an ethic of I'm going to work to learn in this class as opposed to not. That's actually one of the quotes I got from my students as I had surveyed the course. They said, we work to learn in here. And he said it in a very positive way, so I thought that was a great takeaway from it. But as far as extra time goes, I think for the weaker students it added some time, but I think it was better spent than them sitting around and just kind of re-highlighting the same portion of the text many times over. what I found was about that crest moment was about a third through the semester where they got used to how to learn and think a little differently, where many of my stronger students said they just buzzed right through it. They used the chance to make sure they got the right stuff and they didn't take any more than 10 extra minutes. But for my weaker students, it became a chance for them to go back and look at concepts we covered in class, highlight pieces of it, and so I thought they actually performed much better.
Can I just
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I haven't done this flipping, but I was creating all these questions for the first time on Twin for the quizzes last year. And about halfway through, like, I asked them, I'm like, well, obviously it takes time for me to create the questions and time for you guys to do them. Do you want me to keep doing this? Or, would you, like, rather we not do it? And it was, like, overwhelmingly, yes, we want more.
Yeah.
And they did say, like, we do work more in this class, but we feel like we're getting a lot more. We understand this so much better. We wish more of our classes were like this. So I think doing more work is not an issue for the students.
I do Survey Monkeys, which is just a free online way to survey your course anonymously several times throughout the semester, and I can ask open-ended questions. I generally pose it as a statement and ask them to specify how strongly they agree with the statement. And I have one statement of, I'm putting a lot of time in this class, more than I thought I would, and I had a strong agree with that. But then I had my second statement was, the time I'm putting in is meaningful and useful, and I also had a strong agree with that. So to me, that's like right on, because I want them to do that in class. I don't want them to sit around and be like, hey, that Penoyer case, that was so silly, I don't get it, I'm just gonna come and hopefully figure it out. Where now I had them actually at a level, because a lot of times I'd flip out that, all right, so why sit around and not know how to read Penoyer enough? All those who remember that from law school, if you're not a civ pro professor, at the time you're like, I don't know if this is what I really want to do anymore. So I could flip that out. They got it with me, because frankly, it's not helpful to me to be the sage on the stage and say, I have this magic, I know what this says. I give them that, then they can go back and read the case and try and figure it out. And then in class, we could actually say, this is going to be the takeaway points of it. And so those kind of classes were the ones that really shrunk for me. And I used that time at the end to do an in-class negotiation on the choice of forum clause for the students. We did several different, writing inter-office memos. I mean, things I could never do in civil procedure, but were really key to being a litigator and feeling like a litigator. And the students ate it up because they really didn't want to have a huge Socratic about Penoyer. But I want them to know what it says, but they really wanted to and were welcome to spend the time out of class if they can get it. But I think it's that dynamic. If you come back to class and you're regurgitating the videos, they will get mad at you. You just can't do that. So that's, I think, the hardest time for me time-wise was not the videos. It's restructuring everything. I used to do that in class. So now I spent the time I created, and I'm like, well, now I have 45 minutes. I have to fill with something exciting. But it was being able to come into my wish list, really, as a teacher.
How many semesters have you been doing this?
I did it one semester. My first year was this last year doing it. I did it one semester in a core course in jurisdiction, and then I did portions of an upper level class in adoption. But you can pick a unit. So start off small. Take one unit for example, in civil procedure, venue is tricky for the students. It shouldn't be, but it is. I could make it visual. You could just flip that part, and you might not get the entire change and the feel in your class, but it gives you a chance to build up those skills and figure out if it's something you can invest in. They get a little video on a topic that you selected that you know they're gonna have trouble with. They can rewatch them at the exam. They won't find it too onerous, and you don't have to buy in wholesale. You just don't. You can do little pieces of it, and then give yourself a library that you can use in the future.
Two things on saving student time, which Upchurch taught me, so I'm just echoing her. It's number one, don't use it for I always wish I could get to that and I never did, so I'm going to do this little add-on video. That's just cruel, right? The reason you couldn't get to it was because it was too much for them to learn. So you have to, in fact, take something you're always going to assign them. And then the second thing is really have clear instructions for the students. Watch this video first, then read the case. Right? So they interact it with the reading you've assigned. It's not two separate blobs and they don't know which one to do, right? So you have to explain to them how to use the video with the reading you're assigned.
And I would often in a day break up, here's a 2-minute video previewing. So this little one and I won't show it to you, but you'll have the link to watch it. Talks about here's the terminology you need to use. If there's old school lawyers, they're going to use these words. Our book uses these words. So when you're doing legal research, you should know both. And those are things that are important to know, but frankly, they don't need to be in class. I don't need to watch them as I lecture that piece. Then I had read this case, then watch video 2. So even breaking it up makes them able to figure out like how much time they're going to allocate to prepping for a class. And it makes it much more user-friendly. I wanted to move, we've got other things here, but we previewed some of them already. There's one concept that, or one type of technology we haven't talked about, and I wanted to show that to you. It's something called Lino. And I have this one under 2 different categories. One about integrating academic support, and also really reaching out to the non-traditional learner. I think this is my most favorite fun new bit of technology. It has, I think, a lot of different usability, and it's free and it's easy to use. Again, my 2 major criteria for picking any kind of technology. So this one is, I'm just going to show you the video that I made for myself on my Lino board because I think it's easier to see, but I'll just talk over it. In essence, Lino is a platform where you use to create Post-it notes, and you organize them around. So here, I'll show you. Here you're incorporating pictures. You can bring in Word documents, videos. So I made this little board for myself as like, here's how my class concepts are put together. You can pull over a sticky note here, type in what you want, fix your errors. You can change the color you want so that you can designate by the topic for different kinds of posts with different kinds of topics. You can create due dates, which go to a calendar here and can also be synced with Outlook. You can create tags so that it can be searchable. So all these ones, this is my new task tag, but I can do it by concept or group assignment. You can move them around the board. If you have a tablet, you can twist them and turn them. There's easy upload for video, for a picture, so from YouTube, Vimeo, Ustream. You could also upload any kind of PowerPoint, any kind of document, Word, and then you saw the original Post-it, which you can change to any color you want. All right, the nice thing about them is when you have them, you also can easily peel them off. That's how you take them off. You can, let's see if we're getting bigger so I can show you this. So there's the peel it off function. There's the copy to another board, if I'm sharing another board, setting due dates and editing that posting. The nice thing is you can create an individual Lino board, or you can create a group Lino board that you can share with whoever you want to give access to. So I thought of a lot of different cool uses for this one. It's my new favorite toy. And, for myself, I could do it to create like an outline of concepts that I want to cluster together for students, where I can share with them and they can see the organization of it. I can also suggest this to my students. So here's how it integrates with academic support. For many of our students who come in that I've found that have like organizational issues or time management issues, this device is helpful because it allows them to prioritize based on color. It's very visual. They can move tasks around. They can set due dates. If they share it with me, I can follow up with them because the platform is shared online as opposed to like having to check in with them. I can check on the calendar and say, have they completed this task or done X, Y, Z. For civil procedure, it's a course that has a lot of movable concepts. So many of the first year courses have, like for example, we also teach torts, and there's always an elemental pattern. It's very linear, and it works well with outlining. The civil procedure, especially rules, doesn't, because you can't just say, I'm going to look at a pleading rule up here because it's listed earlier in the rule book, because if someone comes in later as an impleaded party, they're going to have to write a pleading themselves, a response to it. And so you need to have moving things. So you want to think of it as more of a flow chart or a clustering of ideas. And we always tell students to do that, and it's hard for students, especially because technology starts to become an impediment, right? Because they go in and they find all the little arrows, they figure out whatever little map they're going to make, and then they get so wedded to what they make when they come in and see you, they don't want to change it. Because I put this one in the middle of the spoke, and if I have to change it, professor, it means I have to change like 15 arrows, and that took me an hour to do. The thing I like about this is it's very free-flowing, so that there's not that kind of cognitive resistance to changing it. You know, they can change the concepts around even as they're rethinking it. You know, they can double color code these things. Like this is something I want to think about, my pathway, the red pathway of filing my lawsuit, thinking about pleadings. And I also might double color code it with green if I want something else. I could say as a professor, if I'm in a group with them, I'm always purple. So if you want to see my comments on it, I'll just kind of check in on your work and create purple Post-its. The other add-on I think you could use is if you have kinesthetic learning in your class. So I use like moving papers to like show organization of writing. I know people writing people, I'm sure you do similar kinds of things, like move this part of the paragraph here or there. This you could create a group page for how many ever small groups you have in your class. Because it's accessible by PC, Mac, and or any kind of tablet, they could all work in a group, move them around, and they could even post it to like this class
page. You could see all the things they did. You could bring it up on your projector and show their Lino created boards. There's a lot of different possibilities with this new toy that I think is pretty neat for finding a different interaction with different kinds of users. We're getting close to the end. The other things, I can go back because I want to make sure that we had, that was the only other new technology. The only other things that we didn't show you were integrating academic support or different kinds of legal skills, and it's all through like online videos. I have recorded practitioners. I edit them through YouTube, which is really easy editing software. So instead of having them lecture in my class where they come in and I may or may not know what they're going to say, or they may or may not know how to focus on what the student needs, there's that disconnect because they're not a teacher. I generally go to their office, I let them talk for a long time, then I cut their things, this is my adoption class, into 2-minute segments. So I cut all her stuff about counseling birth parents into 2-minute segments. We do that. I bring it up in class. It engages people who need to deal with like application in real life as a learner, or who are visual or want some sort of like break up a lecture, or break up even small group work. And then at the end of the class, I'd often bring back the practitioners that were in these videos at a meet and greet networking event, so they could still have that face time, but it was much more productive. I don't know if you want to talk about any EXP ones or about instant
The
share.
other thing, and maybe just click the outlining one so you can watch it while I talk, even though
To
I'm
help
talking
you
about
as you
the-
start outlining civil procedure
This
rules
is a basic
before the
skill
midterm.
outlining, and you
Civil
don't really
procedure
have
rules,
time to
unlike
teach
many
them
of
in
your
class.
first year
So you
classes,
can
can be a
flip
bit
it.
challenging.
So we did a little bit of class on outlining, and then we flipped this little video on how to outline civil procedures.
So they have like
It's optional, they can do it if they want, but for the students who are really struggling, it gives them 10 minutes of extra instruction on outlining, and they're much better by the time they come to your office, right? Because
really
they've
get
thought about it.
lost in all the rules.
So it kind of goes in a second that it's going to go down, and they show like, I'll show you, it's farther down. It takes them through different parts of the outlining process for that class. This one flipped out a skill. So I wanted to do an interviewing a client exercise in class, but I didn't want it just to be what I used to do with first years in the past, like let them kind of just experiment. It wasn't a really good exercise. So I actually flipped out the instruction on funnel technique. This is how you ask questions, and gave them some instructions. So then they came to class and were ready to actually do the simulation. And I was able to guide them better because we had working knowledge about it. So even though it was a Civ Pro class, I was actually able to do a higher level of skill training and involvement than I'd done in the past. So I had the class as a group kind of question my client, but in prior years, they would just start asking random questions, and at the end I'd try and be like, okay, that's not at all what it would be. Now I'd say, remember the video, we want to ask big open-ended questions. Let's just open up the audience, ask big open-ended ones. And while I'm reading about that, because they had the video and I could demonstrate a few, I linked in a couple of YouTubes in my videos, so they could sit and watch it modeled. They could do it as fast or as slow as they wanted before a class. They were better able to actually engage in the class. And their questions were so much better. In fact, they would say, that's too narrow right now. You're too far down the funnel, to each other, which was great, even though I'd given them a little chart of the funnel always before. But I could never really spend that kind of time in class on it because I could teach them civil procedure. I think that's
You guys have questions
I
for
know we
us?
threw a lot at you.
Yeah.
I know, I'm sorry, we spent most of our time there, and I know it's the second or third day here, so. Yeah.
When you use SurveyMonkey
Yes.
to do like your surveys, is that anonymous as well?
Yes.
Or is that
Mhm. Yeah, you get anonymous feedback on it, and so you can set whatever kind of question you want. They have open-ended ones, so the only thing that might potentially be non-anonymous is if they answer something in an open-ended question and trigger who they are. But I found the students didn't want to do that, but it was a good way to get, instead of waiting to end the semester to see what they wanted or liked. And then I also feel, because I've had other friends who've been flipping, and they had some more negative response, because I was kind of pulling them along the way, and they felt like they could tell me, this is too much, this isn't, even though they all said, yes, it's a lot of work, but I think the fact I had engaged with them to see if it was too much made it so much better. Because my end of the year reports were just like, we love this, we hope everybody would do it. And when they told me, I had a lot of pushback, I thought, wow, that's crazy. But I think that's one different thing we did. And I had a lot of good, take from it. Because my top students did say, I don't use these as much, but my weaker students use them all the time. Yeah.
Have you been able to get your fellow faculty as excited about the stuff as you have?
Well, I work with her.
Well, I know you too. I've been on your Capital Law website, you know, scoping at now you guys, but I just wondered if
I'm going to play devil's advocate. I've been promoting clickers at my school for like years. Some of it is technology phobia or just not understanding. So I had a colleague come to a presentation of how to use clickers, but then at the end, he's like, this is really cool. I just have one question. I'm like, okay. He's like, do you have to turn on the computer? Yeah. And I was like, okay, you're not the target audience. So, I mean, I find this stuff cool, but, you know, I personally don't let it limit me if nobody else is going to adopt it, because, you know, if it works for you, your students will still appreciate it.
We think you have to individually teach another faculty member. When I was head of faculty development, and we do sessions, and people would come and say, oh yeah, I looked at that. You have to talk to someone, you go, you know, you could flip that. And they'd be like, oh, well, could you or Angela come to our office and show us? And we're like, yes, we have that time.
I mean, I'm the assistant dean for IT.
Yeah.
So I know that they're not going to listen to me, but if I can find a couple faculty champions, so I like to work with faculty who are early adopters and clearly have enthusiasm like you all.
The IT people love me. And in part it's because they feel unabashed like they're like, yay! Because you know, you have to find that faculty member who's both like super psyched about trying to reach their students in a new way. The one who hasn't gotten into the feeling yet, you know? And then the other criteria is someone I think has had enough faces in technology that they're comfortable in experimenting. But I will tell you, like, I think if you use some of the educational goals as a way to reach people, because I think if you start with the technology, it's really disconcerting. Because people just put up that barrier of, I don't think I can use it. And don't know what the trade-off would be. Because of course, any learning time, you know, you want to make sure that it's well worth the outcome. And I think if they can see the educational goal they're working for, it's better. Plus, if you start with anything about screen capture, that's what we found. So we started doing screen capture about silly, easy things around the building. Like we have
how to reserve a room. Screen capture on how to reserve a room. It got 60 hits. There were 60 people in the building who could not use the system to reserve a room.
But it also made people say, you know, I heard your voice in it. So having a faculty member make it, they're like, so you did that, right? Yeah, I did do that. Was it hard to do? No, it's a red start button and stop button. So I think it's you need to get it's the same like with students. I can say, you're gonna get it, keep with it. But to me, in the room, to them, it's like I'm a different person. Like I'm not real. You know, when one of the students gets a concept and they start saying the exact same words I've said, I often have students be like, why didn't you just say that? Like, I don't know. It's a great way to put it. You know, I mean, it's just once someone in their kids, I think same with professors. If one of us can get it, then they're just sort of, it's not so bad. Yeah.
I work at Chicago Kent with Debbie Ginsburg, and she does regular brown bags for faculty around lunchtime and gets really good participation. I think she said she usually sees about 60% of the faculty over the course of the year. Doesn't mean every single session is well attended, but there's handouts, there's guides, there's things they can come back to. And I posted on the law school ed tech blog back in February, I just tweeted it, something where we really saw the clicker has had a lot of resistance, and sometimes that problem is the historic issue of I used it a long time ago, it sucked back then, everyone hated it, it's going to suck forever. And instead we've had some faculty who are able to come in and they're using Callie's Instapool, which all of you as Callie members have access to. Super easy, and you get a couple faculty who are saying, oh, the students are coming to me saying so-and-so's using it, why aren't you? And you get that kind of peer pressure, but you also have the faculty who come in and have 5 minutes of talking to Debbie in their office and are walking out like, I can do this, it's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and there is a lot of pushback, especially people who ventured out early on in any of these platforms. I mean, I think the ones that are now, even the newer ones coming out, are so much more user-friendly, that if you think that had any kind of working knowledge of most of these, you can make them work. So there's less pushback. Yeah.
I was just going to add, and ironically, that if you do videos, then they don't have to admit they don't know how to do it. So they can learn about it, and they can, you know, they can get involved without putting themselves at risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest pushback I have beyond just like the not being comfortable with technology when I talk to my colleagues is they didn't learn that way, and so they still have that little moment of, but I would really, you know, this is great, Angela, but I would really rather see it on paper. And I said, you know, there are learners like that. But the reality is more of our students, I mean, you can't buy a product. It doesn't have to be an electronic. You You can't buy a product without going to their YouTube channel and how to use it. And that's our students. Their world has not been, the other way. So they are convinced. They tell me, well, I just would rather have the paper. I'm like, okay, that's okay. You do both. Just different people, different ways to reach them. So, and then the students really start to drive it after that because they just start to really, get antsy.
We found that with lecture capture. I mean, we started off, making it an opt-in for our faculty. And then H1N1 helped us say we have
there you
to,
go, that's great. We have to
we
do it,
used a national health crisis to scare the faculty into thinking. No, we really did. I mean, that semester we said, hey, there may be a lot of students out at any given time. We have 30 students out sick with bird flu.
Right.
So we started recording all classes, and then we kind of said, well, now that we're recording all classes, let's not go back to the old model, and people kind of came with us. So.
See, I love seeing the upside to a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. And I don't want to keep anybody. We can take one more question right at the end, but if people want to come up and ask the questions, feel free to do so. We haven't.
No, I'm just going to go along with this. We had the big ice storm in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And that moved a lot of ours towards lecture capture too, because nobody could campus.
That's right.
So to catch
But it was
up
the
on their
students who
work.
demanded it. Like I guess I didn't finish my thought, but it was the students who were in the classes that we had been recording that kept telling their other professors, why don't you record your class? So it helped snowball.
Well, and the screen sharing, I think, is going to be the next wave. So video capture is so asynchronized. The screen sharing, the students speed it up because when I could do out of class review sessions in the middle of the night, and I don't have to go anywhere. I can do it from my home. And if I do the one where I'm only sharing the screen, I can even be in my pajamas. It makes it so much easier. And they just, it reaches them when they need to be reached, which I think is the issue.
I just want to mention one thing we haven't talked about, and is that you can use this technology for different things too. So I got invited to present at a conference in
So anyone who needs to leave, I'm giving you permission to leave because I have a 1 o'clock flight out of O'Hare. So I am going. So if you need to leave,
I was just going to say, I got invited to a conference in St. Petersburg, Russia, and they wanted me to do it live, but I didn't really feel like getting up at 4 in the morning to do this lecture. So I just did the screen capture, and that they really liked it. And then I had all these random people, viewing it on YouTube. Also, I've used this technology to participate as a guest lecturer for other classes, and I've also seen people do a class together remotely from New Hampshire and Seattle, because their students could see each other. So there's just lots and lots of possibilities. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. So I know we need to end, but thanks for your time. And
No, that was my initial thought too.
You make it a 2-click process.
I share my
or Hangouts. We had a really positive response to taking class one through 3 and trying to introduce a recast in Hangouts. We did that. I was in my desk upstairs, and then he was in the workroom. And so we started getting together. Which they got. But then of course, I actually just or they didn't disable it, they didn't enable it.
I don't do anonymous students. I know that my school is a thing where you can do part of your class rated and non-rated. That's right. My school wasn't really